This is BD World. I'm SHABAHAT, and you're watching Fault Lines. United States and China have stayed rivals in the recent history and are rivals to this day. United States has not given up the idea of shoring up new alliances against China. This had given birth to Quad, one of the major alliances against China in the recent history. But during the recent visit to Middle East, President Joe Biden has come up with a brilliant idea: creation of a new alliance called I2U2. And this includes UAE, Israel, United States, and India. Now, since January 1st, President Joe Biden has had many international visits. And in all these visits, the anti-Chinese rhetoric or the anti-Chinese agenda has set on top of his priorities. And the list of the countries given to me by my research team says that he's visited Belgium, Poland, South Korea, Japan, Germany, Spain, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, and went to all of these countries with clear anti-Chinese agenda. Also, the fact that United States interference, rather blatant interference in the issue of Taiwan, hasn't pleased China to a remarkable extent. President Xi Jinping recently gave a phone call to President Joe Biden and expressed his anger over the upcoming visit of House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who's going to visit Taiwan, as per the program shared with the media. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
A new quadrilateral forum comprising India, Israel, the United Arab Emirates and United States formed a new bloc. The grouping, also dubbed as West Asian Quad, first convened last October with a virtual meeting of foreign ministers. Its emergence can be attributed to rapidly growing cooperation among its member countries, with a boost from 2020 Abraham Accords that produced normalization agreements between Israel and several Arab countries and several Arab neighbors, including the UAE. Israel, India, the US and the UAE held an inaugural meeting recently to discuss joint cooperation in food security and clean energy initiatives, among other areas of mutual interest. At the inaugural group meeting, the nations' heads of state said in a joint statement. Highlighting its global ambitions, the joint statement further elaborated that this unique grouping of countries aims to harness the vibrancy of our societies and entrepreneurial spirit to tackle some of the greatest challenges confronting our world. The group announced two initial joint projects: the development and financing of a series of food parks and a renewable energy project, both in India. The new grouping, in which none of the members share geographical borders, is ostensibly created to tackle the growing global economic and political risks.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. As you know, Fault Lines always bring you a bouquet of experts that talk about this issue, the issues that we have picked up at length. And our first guest in today's program is Abdul Rahman Tarar. He is a senior defense and IR expert, also an analyst on Chinese affairs. Abdul Rahman Tarar Sahab, I welcome you to the program.
Shabbat, thank you very much for inviting me on your show and on a very important subject of US-China relationship.
China has become a center point of United States policy in the region, and we see that one after another alliances are coming against China. What do you think can be the reason for it?
I would like to say that though in the recent past there are few alliances in the region which have some orientation against China, and some observers say that these are purely military alliances. But I would like to comment here that though there are countries, those who have joined these alliances willingly, maybe due to some compulsion or coercion, or maybe some countries they have their own strategic interest. But I believe in the event of any future conflict where USA and Chinese are involved, majority of the countries, those who are partner in these alliances, would stay away from armed conflict. Why I say so is that in this interconnected and highly transparent world, the leadership of democratic countries are facing tremendous pressure, domestic pressure, where general public is against becoming part of any alliance, and especially military alliance. You can take the example of Pakistan, though there is no military alliance involved, but there are allegations that USA has interfered in Pakistan's domestic as well as foreign policy, and general public has come in the streets, which has never been seen in the history of Pakistan. So this is a clear evidence that in future military alliances will not work, and USA, I don't know why the USA policymakers are still living in that era of Cold War, and also believe that the same strategy would work in 21st century as well.
But Rahman Saab, why do you think these alliances are being created? Is China such a real threat for United States?
It's not a recent phenomenon. Rather, China was considered as a threat from the day when CCP took control of mainland China and started pursuing its independent foreign policy. However, there was a brief period when USA and its Western allies came rushing to the help of China when it had problems with the Soviet Union. But after disintegration of Soviet Union, China became the only power which could challenge the Western hegemony. So from that day onward, China threat theory became a permanent feature of USA international policy. And whenever China achieved any major breakthrough in strategic weapon systems or some major development in the economic field, it was projected as a factor which would destabilize international economy or global peace. Similarly, whenever USA brought in a major shift in regional or global strategic policy, China was again was projected as one of the reasons or as a destabilizing factor. Another aspect which I would like to highlight is the role of USA military industrial complex in projection of China as one of the major threat to the regional and global peace, because unless the regional countries or Chinese neighbors, which are very big economies, they do not feel threatened from China, they would not buy very expensive modern weapons from USA, and which will definitely affect the business. So I believe that China will continue to be projected as a threat to the global peace and stability by USA as and when it fits into their scheme of things.
And how would you say, how would you respond to the point that for United States, China is a real threat and alliances have to come up against this threat to just cut down the pressure that United States is feeling because of the overwhelmingly increasing influence of China in the world?
I think it has two aspects. One is for domestic audience, and the other is for the entire world. USA leadership and policymakers are finding it difficult to grasp the changed international environment, where majority of the world does not find solutions in military conflict. Rather, they are in favor of peaceful coexistence and mutual approach towards solving those problems which are threatening the future of humanity. However, it seems as still the American leadership, they are trying to sell this idea to their domestic audience as well as the entire world, that they are still the only global power and they are the those who are calling the shot. I fear that this approach is not going to help the world peace and stability, and it would, I think, destabilize all those regions where USA is forming military alliances and unnecessarily creating tensions where peace and development will get affected.
But Tarar Sahab, I understand your point is well taken, but just to connect to my original point, is it in favor of United States to cross horns with China while the world look at both these powers with a lot of expectations? There are issues like supply chain disruptions. There are issues like climate change where both of these powers can work together. And on top of it, there is a global economic disorder playing havoc with the weak economies. So don't you think it's in the greater good of the world if these two powers can work in perfect harmony and synergy?
Increasing tension with China, I believe, Shabahat, is in nobody's interest. I don't know why USA is increasing the temperature, and rather than benefiting from influence of China in the third world and the poor countries and addressing global issues which are affecting the entire world and humanity, China, though very openly announces that it has got no interest in confronting USA militarily, rather it would like to develop infrastructure and ensure connectivity between the poor regions of the world so that they can also benefit from China's development. I think USA policymakers, rather than forming alliances for encircling China and forcing China to divert its resources from poverty alleviation at home and abroad towards military build-up and arms races, I think this strained relations with China is of no use to the world and to the USA as well.
I got your point, Mr. Tarar, but you see, on the issue of Taiwan, the problems and the tensions are increasing remarkably. Now, the visit of Nancy Pelosi, upcoming visit of Nancy Pelosi on Taiwan is again a blatant interference in the issue of Taiwan. China has many times very openly declared that it only believes in a one China policy. How do you think this issue of Taiwan is going to affect the relationship between United States and China?
Shabahat, I'm surprised from last week or so coverage of telephone conversation between presidents of USA and China, and with special reference to Chinese President Xi Jinping's warning to USA of not playing with fire on Taiwan issue. As long as I remember, I have not seen any statement from Chinese leadership that they have any intention to militarily take over Taiwan or forcefully annex Taiwan. And similarly, the evidence also shows that Chinese can exercise, patience to a degree which surprises everybody, and they are not in hurry. They would wait for the right time, and they would shape the environment where maybe Taiwanese feel themselves that it is better for them to join the mainland. However, USA at different occasions and for different reasons keep coming up with policy statements, high officials visits, and selling of highly offensive capabilities to Taiwan, which are for no other purpose than being used against China. So Chinese leadership, I think, is sometimes forced to announce certain policy decisions for their domestic audience, because It is one of the promise of CCP that eventually all the areas which were forcefully occupied or which are not part of mainland China will eventually be made part of the mainland. So therefore, whenever any announcement from USA comes which has some relevance with the Taiwan Strait issues, so Chinese leadership very forcefully issues statement and they are determined to go to any land. So I think it is in the favor of world peace and the region that the USA leadership should resort to peaceful solution of these issues rather than creating tension which can impact global peace and stability.
Thank you very much, Abdurrahman Tarar Shah, for being guest in today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now joined by Ms. Aisha Syed. She is an independent research analyst and joining me from Lahore. Ms. Aisha, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Ms. Aisha, I was talking to Mr. Abdurrahman Tarar and we spoke about the issue of Taiwan, the upcoming visit of one of the senior U.S. Congresswomen coming to Taiwan. How do you think this is going to strain the relationship between the United States and China?
We need to understand that Taiwan does remain an active flashpoint in the US-China relations. So I would call the visit by the US more of a signaling to China to not to pull a Putin-type situation on Taiwan, and that if it does, it may face similar consequences. Although it is unlikely to cause more tensions in the US-China relations than what already exists. But Taiwan for many in the US is viewed as an important country that is located close to China, but also denounces China's claim over its territory. So the visit is also an assurance to Taiwan by the US that it is still valued regional partner and that the US supports its stance against China.
Ms. Aisha, there are problems with regards to China's foreign policy as well. Now, as depicted by United States and by the Western media, US and Russia are quite close diplomatically. But when we see towards China, the diplomatic policy of China with regards to the issue of Russia is a bit different than what is being depicted in these international media outlets. How do you think China is dealing with the issue of Russia today?
Well, China and Russia have always had strong informal agreements and diplomatic coordination, especially against the United States. But these diplomatic engagements have become more formal over the last few years and are probably at their strongest that they've ever been at the moment. But China always issues statements that are cautious and diplomatic regarding any international issue, be it the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. However, there seems to be a strong mutual support by China and Russia for the protection of their core interest, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Also, both states oppose interference by external forces in their internal affairs. And both countries are aligned in policies toward the US at the moment. So I think what we're seeing now is a calculated policy by China, which is to keep building a reliable alliance with Russia, one that it deems important to meet its individual as well as mutual strategic interest, economic interest, political objectives in the region.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aisha, for being a guest in our program today.
My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with the second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, in the second segment of the program, I'm joined by Mr. Shakil Ahmed Rameh. He is a political economist and an expert on Chinese affairs. Frequently appears on our show. Mr. Shakil Rameh, welcome to the program. Now, my first question is about the issue of Taiwan that is increasingly becoming a bone of contention between the United States and China. What do you think of it?
China is a consistent is a stance. China is saying like that, so Taiwan is integral part. And any country, if try to separate China Taiwan from the China. So the China will come after them with the full force. It is a stated and well articulated policy of the China, and China don't hide it. China say it openly and showing the commitment to it for the long. If you look at that, during the last 1 and 2 decades, China is taking more steps, as the President Xi Jinping said. So we are willing, so there are peaceful reunification of the Taiwan. But the China is also committed. If there is a need to take the aggressive or the, you can say, the military action, China will not hesitate to do so. So in this context, I think so every country should respect the sovereignty of China, and not only the China. So sovereignty of any country should be protected, and every sovereignty of every country should be respected. Therefore, I feel so that the USA already has committed to this policy of one China, not at one time but 3 times. So China and USA has issued a communique where they have both agreed to the one China policy. So I can't figure out in this context why why USA still want to go far to flare up the situation. I think there should be more sensible options, and China and USA must work together.
But Mr. Rama, isn't it bad for both the sides to stay in an aggressive posture? Is it just not serving anybody's interest if they continue to keep an aggressive posture against each other?
I believe China and USA must work together, as they are the 2 biggest economy of the world. So their attitude or their conflicts or their cooperation will have the impact on all the world, irrespective of the size of the country. So if the China and US go into a confrontation, it will be bad news for the world, not for the only China and USA, but for the world. If China and USA go for the cooperation, it will be the best news for the world, because then the other countries would be in a position to create a more economic linkages with both countries, and the countries will not have to choose between China and USA. They can freely work with China and USA. So it will create more economic opportunities, not only for China and USA, but for the whole world. I think it will pave a world for the prosper world. So if the China and USA also cooperating and working together, I think it will also pave a way for a sustainable peace, for which the humanity is working for the many decades, and we have faced so many challenges. So I strongly believe China and USA must figure out their differences peacefully through the dialogue, and they should pave a way for the cooperation where everybody can benefit from the economic situation, economic benefit, and there should be no conflict.
Ramesab, your point is well taken. There are different theories when it comes to the reason behind the United States' discomfort with China, and everyone has a different line of argument. What exactly is your belief? What exactly is your line of argument? What is United States' reason of discomfort with China?
In reality, China has become a real competitor to US and the Western countries in the field of economy, in the field of technology. If we look at that, after the COVID-19, China is the main country which is trying to pull the countries out of crisis. China is also paving the way for a green recovery in the post-COVID-19. And if we look at the technology, China has become a long way. China is not, you can say, the follower. China is becoming a leader in the technology. If we look at 5G technology, if we look at quantum computing, if we look at the space technology, missile technology, or other defense technology. So China has become a real-time competitor. And if we look at the economic side, so China is also has become the main, you can say, the biggest trader of the world. So here China is a partner trade with, I think, every other country. And here China is one of the biggest economy which is trying to create its prosperity with other countries through the initiatives like Belt and Road Initiative. And China is also taking lead in devising the development initiatives like Global Development Initiative. So I think China is not a threat, and Western countries and the USA should not treat China as a threat. Rather, they should treat China as a competitor in a positive way and try to build the cooperation.
Point well taken, Mr. Rame. But then what United States is exactly trying to achieve by shoring up new alliances against China? Does it actually serve any purpose?
I think world is going through a number of crises. If we look on the economic front, so we are facing inflation. The commodity market is soaring. So the commodities are becoming out of reach of the common man. If we look at the major economies, The USA, the biggest economy of the world, it is showing the contraction in the last 2 quarters, which is creating the fear of recession. And if we look at the pandemic and the COVID-19, which has also threatened the whole humanity, and it also introduced a new problem for the humanity, like the closures of the economy and the ban on the movement. And these were the two elements which we were celebrating: globalization of economy and the free movement. And if we look at the climate change has become the existential threat for the humanity. It is not only threatening the human being but also the planet as a whole. And the problem is so big of climate change that no country has the capacity or the capability to face it alone. In these circumstances, alliances will not help. There is a need of the cooperation. Why I say so? Because the alliances shows that you are joining hands against somebody, not even if an enemy, but you are treating them as an opponent. So this mentality will lead to the exclusion of the countries, and it will not help. So we need the cooperation with all countries can join hand and work hand in hand to combat these all challenges. If we fail to join hands, if we fail to work together, rest assured we will be meet with the disaster, and disaster will be beyond the capacity of any country, and everybody and every country will be impacted equally. So I believe there is no place for the alliances. We need to move forward for the cooperation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shakil Rame, for being guest in today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now joined by Mr. Mia Ibrar. He is resident and editor of Pakistan Today and another renowned expert on Chinese foreign policy. Ibrar Sahab, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Shabahat.
Ibrar Sahab, I was talking to Mr. Shakil Rame a while ago, and we were discussing this conflict of interest between the United States and China. Don't you think it's not in best interest of both of these nations to stay as staunch rivals against each other in the international political panorama?
I think that the increasing tensions between US and China are not only not in the interest of either US or China, but also not in the interest of the world as well. Because these tensions have hurt the global economic and global pandemic agenda very badly. And you have noticed that global recession has and global inflation has increased due to this trade war and tariff war going on between US and China. I think while the American arrogance, as it is, known in across the world, America still treats China as not on an equal basis, but as a minor nation, developing nation. But this is hurting more the US than China, because Chinese, development has impeded due to pandemic and the zero COVID policy adopted by President Xi Jinping, but not due to the American tariffs. Yes, it has impacted due to this tariff war and tensions with US, but I think the US is more at the receiving end due to this. And the global agenda you are talking about, I think the global agenda, Trump was very clear-headed about that. President Trump had a very clear vision that he wanted not to pursue the global agenda, and he was turning, more. He was thinking more about the U.S. citizens and about the U.S. Own development, and he had, very clearly shrugged off the global politics like pandemic, like this climate change and all the other global issues. He was very clear in his thoughts, but President Biden is treating between the two policies. Democrats have always towed a bit different line, but President Biden is more talking about making America great again.
I'm sorry to cut you here, but this essentially brings me to the second question, which is more important. Now, this is about China's stance on Russia. We saw China seeing Russia's raid on Ukraine in 2014 in the region of Crimea differently. But this time, when it's an all-out war, almost an all-out war between the two sides, that is Ukraine and Russia, China's diplomatic posture has rather been confusing. So what do you think is exactly China's policy or China's stance on the issue of Ukraine?
One should also admire the, foreign policy of China. Whether, China always dislikes conflicts and wars. China's policy from ancient times has been, to support peace and development. And this is also the case with Russia's, war policy or warmongering. Russia not only, annexed Crimea, but it has also attacked Ukraine and its peripheries. China has never supported them. But yes, China also did not support the expansion of NATO into, the neighborhood of Russia, because it definitely impedes the security concerns of Russia. Now, being an ally of Russia, China has always talked about, taking care of the legitimate concerns of Russia in its own backyard, because Russia is being threatened by NATO alliance, and now NATO is actually at the doors of Russia already. So I think that China has been treating very carefully. It has a very clear and clear-headed approach that while Russia should not, annex its peripheries, its neighbors, but also US and its allies should not encroach on Russia's neighborhood. So what I want to say is that China is very clear in its policy vis-a-vis Russia, and while it does not support the capture and annexation of the neighboring states of Russia, it also does not support the NATO expansion into the neighborhood of Russia.
I'm sorry to interject again, but Ibrar Sahab, this is a very important question regarding the issue of Taiwan. Now, Nancy Pelosi, out of nowhere, has planned a visit of Taiwan, despite understanding that Taiwan, according to the US standards, the standards set by United States of America, is not an independent state. United States also understands that under President Xi Jinping, China has made it categorically clear that they believe in one China policy. There cannot be two Chinas. How do you look at this upcoming development, and do you think it's going to strain the diplomatic relationship between the two sides further?
Under its, China containment policy, US has not also, tried to isolate China by, provoking its neighbors as hostile neighbors against China. But also it has, supported rebellion within the Chinese states, whether it's Uyghur issue in Xinjiang, or it is, Bangkok, or Taiwan, or Macau. US has always been supporting, dissenting voices within China, because actually US is not talking about, sovereignty of Taiwan or Bangkok or, Uyghurs, but actually US is, trying to contain the economic rise of China, which has already, happened. And China, is now become second world economic power, which is also the engine of growth of the world and the factory of the world. So now Biden administration, by sending Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, it actually trying to divert the attention of China from its economic revival. You know that for the past 3 years, China's economic revival is happening, but it has not been fully revived. The GDP growth of China, and the revival of China's economic activity is still happening, and it has not been become to normal as yet. So what American wants to infuriate Chinese government to shift its focus from the revival of its development and the path of development Xi Jinping has adopted. So actually these are only tactics to shift the focus of President Xi from development of its economy, and try to just the way they call a war tactic, and but they don't want to go to war with China.
I'm sorry to interject again, but Ibrahim Sahib, since we are running out of time, tell me exactly what United States is then trying to accomplish out of this upcoming visit, if it takes place at all.
I don't think that Pelosi would visit Taiwan. I think that this is a tactic by the US administration to shift focus of China and just to irritate and shift the focus. Otherwise, I don't think that it is really going to happen, because in past US has initiated such efforts, but at the last minute they have avoided it. I think that US is planning something else, and they would trade with President Xi Jinping something in lieu of cancellation of Pelosi's visit. And there might this might have already happened, because President Xi Jinping and President Biden have already spoken on phone, and there might be an announcement sooner than later that Pelosi's visit has been cancelled. But what I see is that the US would keep irritating and disturbing China with such initiatives, because it wants to keep the pot boiling all the time, so that China's economic development process should be, if it cannot be stalled, but at least it could be slowed down. While the pandemic slowed down China's economic growth, I think that these efforts and these tactics, and these are war tactics basically, these tactics are aimed at slowing down the economic development of China, and but the victim has been the world, because the global recession and global inflation have increased manifold due to these tactics, whether it was pandemic or it was trade war between US and China. And this global inflation we are witnessing now is not the only product or the only outcome of pandemic. I think it is also a product of the trade and tariff war between China and the US.
Brad, I'm sorry we're running out of time, so I have to cut you here. Thank you very much for being guest in today's program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Mia Brad, resident editor of Pakistan's Today. And the point that he's made are quite substantial. While China and the United States have different interests, it would be in the larger interest of the rest of the world that these two powers start coming together. Also, the fact that war, coercion and exploitation can only seize a conflict at a particular point but cannot solve the problems for good. We'll join you tomorrow again with another program. And until then,